Hello and welcome to my talk on the topic of, well, how to automate everything on AWS with AWS Systems Manager. My name is Darko, and I'm your friendly local developer advocate. Today, we're going to have some fun talking about a lot of fun things when it comes to automation. And automation is fun, right? So we will be looking at what is operations, what are operations, the most important things of any system, how to automate them, how can Systems Manager sprinkle some help with that. You will be seeing the wonderful demo that I have prepared, and also there's a couple of services or a couple of features I want to show you later on. Something new out of the magic box of AWS Systems Manager. Let's begin. As with anything, we need to begin with somebody. That somebody is Victoria, or this can actually be you. But who is Victoria? reInvent. This is Victoria. Victoria. This is reInvent. Hello. Victoria is our lovely IT operations engineer. She has a long background in system administration. She used to maintain different kind of systems, environments, and in a different kind of companies. But at heart, she is still what you like to call an operations engineer. So we will be speaking about Victoria, or yourself, in a bit of a moment. But actually, let's talk about operations. What are operations? What are operations? Well, according to this fancy quote by Gartner Glossary, basically it's anything related to your IT service management. You enabling your company to deliver its business. So it can be processes regarding to people or management processes, anything like that, to kind of enable your company. It's your standard patching, rebooting, setting up, troubleshooting as well, logging, maintaining, auditing, compliance checks. All of these things fall into the scope of operations. So what does this have to do with Victoria? Well, imagine yourself or Victoria working in a company that makes these delicious donuts. Now, these donuts are made on behalf of customer feedback. So they have a lot of, let's say, smartness inside of this donut company. So they gauge the feedback on social media, on the expressions of people's faces in the donut shops, how many donuts are rated. So this means complexity in terms of an IT system. So we have multiple donut shops across the world, from Los Angeles to London to Belgrade to Tokyo, where you have these different shops with local infrastructure, cameras, IoT devices. You have your cloud, you have maybe different clouds, you have mobile devices, you have machine learning, workspaces for people, you have EC2 instances, you have containers, you have all of these things which fall down on Victoria. Well, she should be operating this entire empire of donuts, or the donut IT empire, right? Many locations, all of these things. And yeah, installing packages, adding users, configuring servers is fun. But how much time does Victoria need to do this until it becomes not fun? So if only there was one thing that Victoria could do to kind of make it much, well, less tedious, something that starts with automation. Let's talk about how can she automate things. So automation comes from, the origin of the word automation is from a Proto-Indo-European word meaning auto, which is self, and manthos, I'm sorry, people from the Greek origin, manthos in Greek, which means man, basically, which means to think. So to think self. Basically, helping you do things that you don't have to do manually, right? Automating stuff. So think about automation. And it's very important that all of us have done some automation at one point. But think of your first bit of automation. I remember I was in this exact same room. I was, I think, 16 at the time. I was your local kid who you would bring a computer to and, hey, Darko, reinstall Windows XP for me. And for me, it was usually, I would just bring a CD and then burn the CD with Windows XP, get all the drivers and set up the computer. It would take like 6 hours for me to do it. Then I figure out the wonders of automating these things through network-based imaging services. So I would set up a little server in my room with PXE enabled, and I would basically deploy operating systems to these desktop computers. Took my job from like 6 hours to just maybe an hour, so I can focus more on games and the important things, right? So, but you may be wondering, like, yeah, automation is great, but there's always this massive curve, if you've seen that XKCD comic, where a curve says how much time you should invest in automating versus doing things. Yeah, true, but complex systems actually bring a lot of value to automation. If you have like a new system where the surface of is quite small, it's very understandable, so you don't have to worry about automations too much because, hey, it's just 2 clicks. But that system, as anything else in the cloud, grows complex. So you want to be able to automate things so you can actually focus on your core business value. Patching systems and adding users and rebooting instances usually is not your core business value. So try to work on bringing the better donuts to your customers. But how does one automate stuff, right? So in the olden days, you had like pulleys and levers in the ancient times, or pistons and steam in the Industrial Revolution. How does one automate things in this wonderful year of 2020, or in the cloud world? We do it with code. Code is this lovely little thing we use to tell our favorite computers to do certain things. This is how we instruct them. This is how we ask them to do things. From stuff like writing a little piece of text on the screen to, I don't know, moving a memory contents from memory block A to memory block B. Or, well, maybe we can do even something more grand and actually do stuff with it, like patch an instance, reboot an instance, add a user, or configure a server automatically. Yes, all of that can be done through code. And in this example of Victoria's code, where she, what does she do here? She reboots an EC2 instance. She can all do that through some lovely code. And that's the point. You and Victoria as well, should use code, should use automation, well, to give you time to focus on the important things, right? But at the end of the day, it's just to make your lives just that bit easier by not having to do repetitive, tedious tasks. So let's go back to Victoria. Okay, I've told Victoria, yes, Victoria, don't do anything manually. Don't go ahead and click a bunch of buttons and just hope it works. Automate things. Yes, you should automate. Oh, of course, yes, she should. But how? How? Yeah, with code, but how? What? Where do I click? Well, let me talk to you about AWS Systems Manager. This is a lovely service from AWS that allows you to do a lot of those things when it comes to operations on AWS. So Systems Manager has a vast array of automation capabilities well, we'll get into that in a moment. Let's answer one question first. What exactly do we need to automate? Well, there's a bunch of things. I gave you an example of installing Windows XP over a network PXE server. Yeah, but times have moved on since then. But what do you automate in your operations? Well, you can do things like patching, provisioning. You can do package installation, inventory collection. Inventory collection, again, I put it twice in that list because it's so important. Access logging, AMI creation, remediation, even like just collecting of information on your instances so you can display it in a lovely dashboard. All of these things are kind of the things we need to automate. These are the parts of, let's say, your runbooks, your operation tasks that your operations engineer need to execute from time to time. So Systems Manager is this lovely tool that gives us the ability to do all of those things and more. From automating stuff, giving you better visibility, to doing it all on a hybrid setup, because, hey, not everything runs in the cloud. Having the ability to have compliance, because we want to be able to deliver those lovely compliance reports that everybody loves. And also, because it's important, connecting AWS Systems Manager to your lovely IT service management and operations management toolkits. So, but yeah, these are all fine bullet points. This is all the thing you could read in the documentation. I like to distill Systems Manager down to 3 points. Group, visualize, and take action. Basically, that's what Systems Manager does. Takes resources in a specific group, shows them to you, or shows their state, and, well, how do they look like, and, well, you can take actions against those things. So, pretty cool. But speaking of those actions, let's do an example. So, for example, let's say we want to install a package. Well, actually, Victoria wants to install Docker. Let's say she wants to install Docker on all of the EC or a portion of EC2 instances that she manages. Right? Of course, you can go in and SSH into your your EC2 instance, your Raspberry Pi at home. You could do that once, twice, 20 times. But at a certain point, it becomes a lot tedious. So we need to find a way to automate these things, right? So with AWS Systems Manager automation, this is quite possible. Now, I just want to make a point here. Systems Manager automation is a name of a specific feature of Systems Manager. This is not automation as general term automation. There's a little sub box on the right-hand side where you can see the little automation or automate feature, and this is where you can actually run things like your automation and run command documents, and we'll get into that in the demo. But basically what this does is gives you the ability to actually execute common repetitive IT operations, IT tasks at a very simple way. It gives you the ability to actually create runbooks, and these runbooks are nothing more than just lovely YAML or JSON formatted documents or pieces of code that tell you in steps what needs to be executed and how. And we're going to actually do that. And they can also be triggered on demand or at a specific event, for example. Something happens in CloudWatch, it can trigger a specific runbook so it can automatically remediate things. Let's say you lose memory on your JVM. And the only thing that helps is restarting that JVM. Well, that can actually be done through Systems Manager automation. If something like that happens, an event pops up in CloudWatch, the event triggers your Systems Manager automation, and your JVM is rebooted. So pretty cool. And that those runbooks actually look like this. So if you have a look here, this is how your typical runbook would look like. So let me just grab a sip of water so I don't become so I don't start coughing. Oh yes, it also works in hybrid too, cross-region, all of the bells and whistles that you want to have a properly, in your donut empire, you wish to do these things in multiple accounts, multiple regions, because that's the way you do it. Of course, that's all supported by AWS Systems Manager. But Darko, you've been screaming at the camera for the last 12 minutes. You did mention a demo, though, right? Yes, absolutely. And I promised a demo, and I'll show a demo right now. A demo which is going to be consisting of Victoria, or past Darko, actually, writing some Systems Manager automation documents, actually running a run command document, and writing an automation document to install Docker on Ubuntu-based systems. It's going to be mostly console, it's going to be mostly text, so I hope you really enjoy that, and some lovely Vim text editing. So let's actually kick it off. First of all, let's create a run command. So I'm going to be using Vim here to create a YAML document that's going to be installing Docker. So initially, just add a couple of metadata stuff here, things like schema versions, your descriptions, and your ever-present parameters. And these parameters are going to basically define a couple of things. For example, which build version of Docker I want, test, or the normal one. And after these parameters are set here, I'm going to define some main steps. This is the meat and potatoes of your run command. The actions. The action in this case is going to be called AWS run shell script. The shell script in this case is basically going to execute a simple shell script on my EC2 instance. In this case, I'm going to call it update system. And you guessed it, it's basically going to run an apt-get update and apt-get upgrade on my command. So basically defining the input as run command, and here is where I define my sudo apt update and then sudo apt upgrade -y. Simple as that. This is just to kind of keep the system up to date. Is this the best way to do it? Not sure, but in this case, a great illustrative way of doing it. Now, let me actually copy this entire code block and create another step, which is going to be called another step that actually installs Docker. So copy here, paste it, and I'm going to change a bunch of things here. So it's still going to be run shell script. It's going to be just called get Docker, and it's going to run. I'm going to copy paste the command here. It's a wget command that copies the version of Docker from docker.com depending on the build parameter I defined. So it gets all of that here, perfect, and let's just paste everything else here. The rest of the commands here are something like actually running that script, the install Docker part. It's going to execute that script that's downloaded. It's also going to install the parts for Docker Compose. And finally, using pip to install Docker Compose, because we all love Docker Compose, right? So a bunch of steps here that are going to be executed, 5 steps in total. But now, let's actually create that automation document, which is a bit different. Automation document is going to do a very similar thing, again, with the metadata here. It's going to do a very similar thing, but it's going to work on a level above the instance. It's actually going to assert, is the instance running? It's going to run that previous run command document we wrote, and it's also going to tag the instance once it is completed. So as parameters, we're going to pass an instance ID because we want to have an instance ID that we pass on to the run command, and also the build, the Docker build, that we're going to actually pass on to that run command so it can get the proper version of Docker. So main steps. This is the assert running command. This is amazing because it gives you the ability to actually assert or an AWS resource by calling an API. Basically a resource property by calling an API. And you don't call an API directly here. You'll see in a moment. I mentioned that it's critical, and that on failure, it will abort the execution of this run command. And if it's successful, it's going to go to the install packages step. Now, inputs. The service is EC2. That's the API service. The API is going to be called describe instances. So it's going to call the EC2 describe instances API call on these instances, on the instance IDs that I pass it on. Now, what's great about this is that I can actually get the specific property. I'm defining a property selector right now, and the property is going to be reservation and instance, and I want to get the state of the instance. Is it running or not? And you can see that state.name. That's the property I'm going to be getting, and then the desired value, of course, has to be running to assert the instance is running. But you can, in essence, run any API call like this and make decisions based off the output or the value of that API call. And I just spaced a bunch of other things. For example, here you can see me running run command. I'm going to run the document that we created before, passing it the instance IDs and also passing it the build parameter. And finally, the create tags. Again, this is a specific execution where I actually write tags on an instance, and I'm going to write the tag called Docker installed and set the value to true if or when this is done. Now, let's actually go ahead and create the command document on AWS. So I'm going to be using the CLI here. I'm going to be using the AWS CLI, just running the SSM command called create document. I'm going to pass the YAML document that I've created in the first step with all my Docker installation parts. And as you can see, I'm just pointing it to the content and defining which document type. Document type is important because this is a command document, not an automation document, a command document. Is going to be YAML in this case because by default it's JSON, and it's easier to read YAML, right? And the region, of course, EU West 1. And what you'll see here that that path Darko actually forgot to add the name here. So I just need to add the name of the document because that's very important. It's the key thing. So I'm going to pass the name, and it's going to be called Darko, I believe, Darko install Docker. Yes. So this is the name of the command document called Darko install Docker. Now, once I figure out how to hit enter, that's going to be, I'm going to create the document. And the output is basically going to be a bunch of JSON stating that, hey, it has been created. Excellent. Let's now move to the creation of the automation document. Now, this is very similar. I'm running the same SSM create document command. The only difference here is that I'm actually pointing it to a different file. And also the type of the document is not going to be command, it's going to be automation. As you can see, I've actually remembered to put the name here. The content is going to be the file, the other file I've created. And the document format, not the format, the type is going to be automation. And I'm just going to skip a bunch of things here because it's the same thing. Once it's successful, it's going to output JSON. We should be fine. Perfect. Yeah. And we're going to move on right now to the AWS console where I can see that both automation and the command documents have been created. Let's have a look at the command document. As you can see, Darko install Docker, that's the name of the command document, and you can see the commands in this in the content because all of the things I've done here can actually be done through your web UI. But I'm a fan of the command line, so yeah. You can also see the automation document, and you can actually see all of the steps here. And we have 3 steps in the automation document by assert running, install packages, and actually tag the instance. And you can see all of these steps and the step inputs here. The content is the same. As you can see here, this lovely editor. There's also a bunch of different versions. The versions are important because you can use different versions when executing tasks. Speaking of executing automation, let's actually execute some. So I'm going to select my documents. I'm going to select the automation document in this case. And I'm going to make sure I choose the correct version. I'm going to choose 1 because that's the only version I have. Selecting an instance, I can basically use much more complex things here, but I'm specifying an instance ID in this case. the build parameter I'm setting to test because I want to install the test version of Docker. And finally, you can see you get an amazing shareable link that you can actually pass on to your operations folks, or even the CLI command to execute this exact automation from the lovely command line. By hitting executing automation, I can see that it's currently in progress, and there's 3 steps happening. The assert running, A, is my instance running, the install packages, install my packages, and finally create tags. And you can see that the assert has been finished quite fast because it's a single API call, and the install packages actually takes a moment or so. So what's happening right now, and we can go and see right now, is that it is actually installing the packages. It's running through all of my 5 steps in my first command document, and you will see that it's actually completed, but hey, eventual consistency just takes a moment or so for this to show up. And yeah, Docker is already installed because, hey, I needed to test this out. So, and finally, the tags, it's going to tag my instance properly by adding that Docker installed true tag, and we're going to see that in a moment as soon as this step has completed successfully. Of course, you will not run this on a single instance. You would probably run this on multiple instances. But yes, you can see this instance, and if yeah, that's the instance ID I passed, and the tags has Docker installed set to true. Well, bam, automation complete. Of course, you can much more elaborate on this, much more. But hey, it's a simple example, simple demo to get you running. But it's very important to write your automation documents properly and to use them as much as possible to offload those pesky tasks that you need to do and can be automated. But wait, there's more. There's actually much more to Systems Manager than just your run-of-the-mill bash scripting and your automation documents. You can actually augment your automation. You can augment a lot of different things on AWS Systems Manager with lovely tools from Chef, Puppet, or Ansible. So it's not only Systems Manager that gives you the ability to automate things. You can actually automate things still with Systems Manager, but use things like Chef, or Puppet, or Ansible. You can actually execute natively from Systems Manager. You can execute your Chef cookbooks, your Puppet modules, and even your Ansible playbooks on your instances. So let's say, instead of complicating things and running a bunch of user add commands to add users, you can actually use your simple run-of-the-mill Ansible playbook to add multiple users to a server, which is great. So you can, it's not just that, right? And if you want to go beyond Systems Manager, you can use like Chef on OpsWorks and Puppet on OpsWorks as well to have a fully fledged configuration management system on AWS. But now, the moment you've been waiting for. The new features that have been announced, that have been actually, well, I believe you heard about them recently. A couple of new features for AWS Systems Manager that can, well, help you a bit more with your automation and operations. And why that? Well, one thing that's important when it comes to automating things is, well, automating the right things at the right time. Of course, we have this massive cloud scale that all of the things can potentially be automated, but we want to make sure we do it, well, do changes to the right things and do them at the right time and with right approvals. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of things that can kind of help you with that. Number one, do you have your EC2 instances? Do you have your Windows, Linux, and even Mac servers somewhere, on-prem, on the cloud? Well, in the palm of your hand. Let me talk about AWS AWS Systems Manager, Fleet Manager. Fleet Manager is this lovely administration utility, a consistent administration utility across your entire server fleet, be that Linux, Windows, or even Mac. Hey, you want to change some registry keys, you want to look at files, you want to, just potentially run a run command or a playbook or a runbook on these instances. You can now do it with AWS Systems Manager, Fleet Manager. It's a great thing to kind of streamline remote administration of your servers. It's available right now. Make sure to check it out. Wonderful service, especially if you have your donut empire with a lot of things happening behind the scenes. Another thing, when we talk about applications, and applications are usually, people, when you say application, people think like, oh, well, it's my code. It's a bit more than just your code. Applications, especially in 2020, in the modern cloud world, are much more than just your code. It's much more than just your server. Applications consist of multiple different things. Your VPCs, your Cognito user pools, your containers, your container nodes, yes. And all of those little things are actually part of our applications. Now, if you run some operations against your application or your application context, you want to make sure to kind of execute automation on the whole application, not just on servers or tables or something like that. So with Application Manager, another lovely feature from AWS Systems Manager gives you the ability to manage your application, not just a single resource. Basically gives you this lovely visibility across multiple different AWS services, multiple different elements of your application, gives you the ability to actually automate things, run commands, run your playbooks and runbooks against these resources. You can view this operational data, the data that's getting funneled in by these services to a single pane of glass. And of course, for all of those Kubernetes stuff out there, your EKS clusters, you can actually manage your EKS clusters and run operational tasks to those EKS nodes with this lovely service, or feature that is. Excellent. One more thing. All of these changes, all of these automation things, I mentioned runbooks, playbooks, all of these scripted things, install Docker. You saw me install the test version of Docker. One thing that can be problematic when doing such a thing is that imagine installing the wrong version of Docker on all of your servers. That wouldn't be the best thing, right? So if there was only a service, a feature that can audit or vet automation documents or runbooks and kind of approve them to run. Or for example, let's say you cannot execute your automations during off work hours or those lovely Friday afternoons, right? Well, with AWS Systems Manager, Change Manager, well, it gives you to actually manage your changes. It gives you the ability to basically have a change management system for your AWS resources, your on-premises resources, well, anything that you manage with AWS Systems Manager. So you have the ability to actually approve specific processes, approve runbooks. For example, you want to run a runbook that will reboot a server, or do something on a server, and you can set up an approval process that, for example, it allows only this to happen during work hours, Monday to Thursday, 9 to 5. If somebody wants to run an automation that, I don't know, refactors your code base on a Friday afternoon, it requires specific approval, and it will go through the entire approval process where it will contact the right people to give it approval, and it will keep on notifying those people, hey, this has happened, this is the current state of this automation, and, well, has it gone good or not? So Change Manager is a great way to kind of audit all of these things, and just to make sure you do not mess up at scale. And finally, the wrap-up slides, the one you've been waiting for. Time to me to end this presentation slowly, but I have a couple of homework items for you. Number one, find things that can be automated and just automate them. Don't spend time on repetitive tasks. I know they can be okay sometimes. You can, shut your mind off and just keep on doing it. But hey, you can do better things, right? Automate stuff. Approach things through code. Remember there was this one tool a long time ago that you can automate mouse clicks? Don't do that. Do things through code. Make it more predictable, make it more repeatable, and make it version controllable. That's the word. Do things through code. Do things through Chef cookbooks, Puppet modules, Ansible playbooks. Do them through Systems Manager automation documents and run commands. Make it much more visible and transparent to everybody to see what you're doing. And finally, introduce fun into IT operations by automating them. Oh yeah, way. And yeah, check out the new services out there for safe automation, such as Change Manager, and automating across your application stack with Application Manager, and of course, maintain your entire fleet of servers with Fleet Manager. My name has been Darko Mesaros. I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. I had a lot of fun doing this, as you can see. I'm a fan of operations. I'm a fan of Systems Manager and all of that stuff. If you want more of this, if you want more bald, bearded operations in AWS, make sure to follow me on the social medias, YouTube, Twitches, Twitters, and all of the stuff. I post a lot of good content out there. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy this presentation. And do not forget to rate the session. It really helps us a lot. So once again, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of reInvent. Bye-bye.